Hello everybody, welcome to December, the Codependency month, the month of codependency, as I've decreed it anyway. And today I have got Chula in to talk about it. He's a psychotherapist and a very good friend and colleague of mine. And we are going to discuss codependency, but in particular relation to artist and talent management. So, welcome Chula.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me. Nice to be here.
Oh, that's okay. It's nice to have you. Nice to see you. Nice to see somebody over this time anyway. Yeah. And as we are officially working, all the better for it.
Yeah.
So tell me about your psychotherapy and music industry connection.
Right, okay. Well, that comes from my history as a musician. So in my 20s, I was in a band and we had a record deal. And unfortunately, I got involved with drugs. I'm an addict in recovery. And I became addicted to heroin, and that took me to a place where the music became something in the background, and then I had to go into rehab in 2003. And then that's then led me into the field that I'm in now. So I started working in the drug and alcohol field, helping people in statutory treatment, and then gravitated towards private work. And then really what put the two things together for me was when we met. So we met at a conference at the UCASAD conference. And
when was that? 2017?
If not before. And then I started taking clients through music support.
That's right.
And you were
we met. People. I liked you. I started referring clients to you.
Yeah.
I thought you were very good, and I really liked your take on it, because you were in a band, you were a drummer in a band, signed to Universal Music, and you got dropped at Universal Records. You got dropped because of your drug use.
The addiction took over and the productiveness of the band fell to the wayside, and they decided that it wasn't going to work.
Do you think in retrospect, not that anybody knew any better in those days, I think we're talking about the 90s, are we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think in retrospect there would have been a better way to, or more practical way, or a more helpful way, bearing in mind how aware we all are of mental health these days and how unaware we were in the 90s, in terms of how your management and record company dealt with you as a using addict? Do you think there perhaps might have been a different way to go, other than off you go, boys, see you later?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that we're much more aware about mental health and addiction and the problems that people face in terms of their emotional well-being. And back then it was something, especially in the music industry, was just brushed under the carpet. So whilst people knew that I was in a mess, I think people were very much ignoring it as long as I did my job. And that was where an intervention of some kind, or in terms of support, would have been really helpful. You know, if someone had come to me and said, look, you look like you're struggling, what's going on? Which nobody ever did at any point.
Right.
I think I would have been, there were certain points where I would have been very willing to talk about it. And if there'd been some sort of support or treatment on offer, I imagine, again, not at all points, there were certain points where I was just having a whale of a time and completely off my face, but there were also times when I was at points of absolute despair, and you know, at those points I would have probably taken the help if it had been offered, but it never was. And that's what's key now. I think we need to be preempting, you know, people's problems and not waiting until they're in crisis, you know, being able to spot it before it becomes devastating and offering people help.
So had the tour manager or a manager or somebody from the record company say, hey Chula, what's going on? You look like, you know, I've noticed that there's been some changes and perhaps you look a bit like you're struggling. Is there anything that we can help you with?
Yeah.
I know somebody who you could talk to, or if you'd have been given that opportunity, like you say, not when you were in the period where you're like, "Whoa, this is fucking brilliant," but actually in the period where it started to become not so brilliant and started crossing over into slavery, the agonising slavery that drug addiction is. You would have had their hand off for it.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. I think so. Yeah, it's difficult to say, but I do think that at the end of the day, there's nothing on offer.
No.
So I didn't even have that option.
No.
I felt I had to keep it secret. I had to keep it to myself, and I just had to keep going.
Okay.
But that was ultimately my downfall.
Okay. And how long was it when you left the band, or the band got dropped, and you to when you went in recovery?
I think it was about 3 or 4 years, because I didn't have any other qualifications. I didn't have a career of any other kind to fall back on. So I just was a heroin addict, and that's all I was doing. And I went downhill really fast, physically, mentally, emotionally and spiritually. I got to a place where I just couldn't take it anymore, and I was very unwell. So, and I was lucky enough to find myself my way into a good rehab.
So despite the fact that it took you 3 to 4 years to hit a rock bottom, to bottom out on your heroin addiction after you got dropped, you still do believe, well, you've just told me, you still do believe that an intervention 3 or 4 years prior to that, in the right way, with the right people.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you today about how codependency works, particularly in general, but also particularly within the context of artist and talent managers.
Yeah.
I was a talent artist manager, and I certainly know that the big draw for me in getting involved with that particular part of the music industry was the idea of looking after somebody. I know that's not everybody's reason. I know people do different things for different reasons, but certainly from my point of view, there was a real sense of wanting to stick it to the man, fighting the good fight, and having that contact, that close, being in close proximity to the level of artistry that was going on. Obviously that isn't a unwell thing to do, but I think there was a huge part of me that needed to be needed.
Yeah.
And an artist manager or talent manager role offers up a very good solution to that desire.
Yeah.
And what would you say to that?
I would agree, absolutely, 100%. And I think actually my profession is the same. I don't think there are many psychotherapists who don't have that intrinsic caring nature, that desire to support people and to help people and to look after people. I think is very ingrained in, if you look at those professions, it's a common thread throughout them. And with managers, yes, there may be other motives. And like you said, being involved closely with the art itself or the creativity is one of them, but I do think on another level it's about wanting to represent people, wanting to look after people and wanting to care for people.
So tell us a bit about codependency.
Well, codependency I think comes in many forms, and the way I was introduced to it was really in the context of addiction and codependency. So it's often said that next to every addict there is a codependent, and how I understand that is, one definition of codependency is a helping or supportive relationship that enables someone to stay stuck in their addiction or their mental ill health, or in a position where they're not taking full personal responsibility. So codependency can look like a relationship where someone's really helping the other person, but actually there's something within them that's driving them to do that, and they're getting a degree of self-esteem from it. And then if you look into that even deeper, usually that's come from what we call a systemic place. So they've created that pattern of relating from their upbringing, and maybe relationships with mum, dad, siblings, or other family members. So that's how I've worked with codependency, from sort of almost working backwards in a way when I've been working with people.
The interesting thing is that a person can be an addict and a codependent.
Oh, yeah.
So we shouldn't just look at it through the lens of the codependency rests wholly with the talent or artist manager.
Absolutely.
And the addiction issues, should there be any, it exists solely in the artist or talent.
Yeah.
Actually, there could be a bit of both in either.
Oh, yeah, I think the codependency is shared. So the addict is being codependent by allowing or using that person to prevent them from getting to a place where they take personal responsibility. And then the carer or helper or supporting person is using the codependency to get self-esteem by helping someone, and maybe in their past they weren't able to help someone, or there was someone they couldn't help, and it's about facilitating that inner trauma, if you like, or inner experience that remains unresolved.
So I guess what we're saying then is that the blueprint of our relational behaviour in the way we relate to other people. Say you and I are relating here.
Yeah.
The imprint of how we do that will be formed very early on in our childhood.
I believe so. I believe so. I think that there can be external factors that arrive along the way through our developmental years, but primarily it stems from maternal and paternal dynamics.
And within a band or a film production unit or people on set, there can be codependency within that framework as well. So it's not just artist manager and talent manager and band and band individuals. It can happen within the let's say band in this instance.
Yeah, well, it's a systemic issue, so it comes.
And what do you mean
system.
by that? Just to explain to people.
Well, when I say systemic, I mean it comes from a system, but when we use the word systemic, we're talking about the family system, really. So it's originated in the family system. Now, that could be in various different ways. So, say, for instance, you have a family where one of the parents has passed away and the eldest child becomes a surrogate parent and parents the younger siblings, then that person can develop codependency. And that doesn't necessarily mean that any other one person has caused them to develop this codependency or even themselves. The cause is in the systemic or the family sort of system and the ways in which people have interacted or shifted in their roles. And I suppose to some degree the lack of care. So maybe the lack of care that individual experienced made it easier for them to become the carer, and so they didn't necessarily have to face what they had lost. So that's just one scenario. But yeah, when we say systemic, what we're talking about really is family system that then can be replicated or reenacted in another system, like a band or even a record company or a management company or a group of people. With any group of people, when I've been running groups or doing group psychotherapy, it's really important to understand that group will hold its own systemic qualities, and those qualities are made up of all what the individuals are all bringing to it from a systemic perspective.
And that is really, really interesting, isn't it? The sort of constellations, if you like,
exactly.
of how groups are formed and what each person is bringing from their own family of origin, history, their own system, and then how they interact with one another.
Yeah.
And we all have a tendency, don't we, to play our role, the role that we played in our family of origin within the new group.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I really am interested in bringing the to light group dynamics into the consciousness of artist and talent managers, because it is an intense relationship. You're not going to the office and seeing people within the confines of 9 to 5, and then everybody goes home, and then you go back there the next day, and then you've got family life at home, and you go on holiday with your family, and you see your friends, and everything is, I suppose, can be not boxed up, but certainly there's boundaries.
Yeah.
And I guess what with lots of other business relationships, but in particular talent and artist management, not only are you there to run an artist business, not only are you there to help birth the creative process, but you're also there as a process manager, an emotional process manager. So you're a filter from the outside world to feed into or to present a set of circumstances or decisions to be made to an individual, which you have to understand their framework of reference and how they are. So actually having traits of codependency would be very, very beneficial in this, because we know that codependency is a process addiction and is in in response to relational trauma, but it also has its upsides in a way. Maybe you could talk a bit more about...
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I've managed teams in the past, and sometimes it's really good to have a codependent in your team, because you know that they'll get stuff done. You know that they're going to go, above and beyond to get the job done and to do it to a really high standard. And whilst that may inadvertently push other people out of the way or sort of step on a few toes, which isn't great, actually gets to a place where, you know, you can use those people and you can delegate to those people certain things that you maybe wouldn't delegate to someone who takes a more relaxed approach. And, you know, as you were talking, what came to my mind was that actually being in that position that you described within the industry is a very powerful position. To be that gateway between record company and the outside world and the press.
Yeah, the accountants, the lawyers,
everybody, and the artist. That's a really powerful and empowering position to be in. And unfortunately, with codependency, what I've seen is that it often comes from a place where someone's been disempowered. So someone's been disempowered when they were young, and then they've adopted that caring role because it makes them feel powerful. And then they're attracted to roles in terms of professional career where that's acted out even more, and they like that sense of being valued, being of worth, and of having power, actually.
Yes, I don't believe that anybody gets into the career that they do for no reason. There's always a reason, isn't there?
Yeah.
But somehow we're always trying to overcome, succeed, win, triumph over our original traumas. So that can often be a big draw, can't it, for people that take up artist management roles.
Yeah, and the key to it is a word you used a second ago, which was consciousness. And I do a lecture on where I'm training therapists, and it's called The Wounded Healer with Septic Wounds.
Ooh.
And it's basically about how, you know, many people who train to be therapists, or many people who become artist managers, I do think there's similarities as well. And one of the similarities is that, generally speaking, those people will, on some level, be able to be described as wounded healers. So they want to be healers, but they do have wounds. Now, most of us, I believe, speaking for myself, I'm definitely a wounded healer. Now, that's fine, because if you're a wounded healer, that's quite natural, that's quite normal, and that's fine. And it doesn't necessarily have a detrimental impact on yourself or the person that you're looking after or taking care of. However, if you're not aware of that, then what you have is the septic wounds. And if you have the septic wounds, then you're going in there and helping people, and everything's spilling out onto yourself, onto them, onto others, and that can actually be very unhealthy and destructive. So the key is bringing into consciousness someone's awareness of the fact that they're not just a helper or a manager or a therapist, they're also someone who has wounds, and they need to be able to identify what they are, what the traumas are that they've experienced, and how much has been resolved and how much remains yet to be processed, so that people do the right amount of therapeutic work in order to be just a wounded healer rather than a wounded healer with septic wounds.
And how do we think that could manifest in the artist management relationship? How could the septic wounds, in inverted commas, the unconscious codependency traits that are of course there because of original wounding, or to put it in a non sort of jargony way, how can an artist manager fuck things up by being unaware of their own stuff? Because that's what we do our workshops about, isn't it? That's what we try to bring into consciousness when we're doing our workshops with managers. And also when you and I worked on the Music Manager's Guide in 2017, and also what I talk about in Lucy Heyman and Rhiannon Jones's book, which is coming out at the beginning of next year, about codependency. You know, all of this for me is an effort to bring people's awareness up on what they could be bringing to the party. So how could a manager fuck things up for an artist, or within that dynamic, being unaware of their stuff?
I've seen it. I've worked with it. I've worked with artists where I've been saying to the manager, look, there's an issue here, it needs to be dealt with, and you need to do this, this and this. And the line is, well, first of all, we need them to work, so that's going to interrupt the workflow, and that's not possible. And secondly, don't worry, I can take care of it. And that's something you hear a lot with codependents, is codependents feel that they can solve the problem, or they can solve the individual who's not well solve their problem. And actually that's never the case. You know, even as a therapist, I know that I can't solve my client's problems. I can support my client to explore what the problem is and then guide them towards options with regards to solutions, and then hold them through that process of trying out possible solutions and hopefully finding something that works. But I can't cure my clients. You know, no therapist can. And that's a really important thing for you know, talent managers to really be aware of, is that they can't solve all the problems for this person, and that there's outside help that needs to be brought in, you know, obviously when necessary and when needed. And that's what I've come up against the most, is that the manager will say, well, no, it's okay, if I get them to do this and they do that, then it will be fine, and then that problem will go away. And I'll be saying, well, actually that's not really how it is, and they're not willing to hear it.
And I suppose, you know, that as I was saying, the fuck up could be minor in terms of, I don't know, somebody not selling as many records or selling as many tickets, or because there wasn't an intervention that was made, or particularly what I find troubling is when young people, you know, kids 17, 18, 19 go into the pop music world, let's say, or in fact any genre of music, you know, and don't actually have a chance to develop their adult capabilities. So actually what you referred to just now would be detrimental to their, you know, they're growing up, their development into healthy adults.
Well, it's the parent-adult-child stuff, isn't it?
It's the parent-adult-child, which incidentally we're talking about next month. Maybe I'll get you in so we can talk about that. But I guess the worst case scenario is going back to your experience, which is not getting the intervention when needed. Yeah. You know, you were lucky. You went into rehab. Thank God. But you could have just as easily died.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I was on my way to that.
Yeah. So I guess what we're looking at is if managers are on the codependency side, let's say, and they do feel like they can manage things that are beyond their capability, beyond anybody else's capabilities, and they're not placing their artists into a situation where they can be dealt with professionally by mental health professionals, then we are looking at people taking their own lives potentially, or overdosing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's happened.
Yeah.
You know, the artists that we've lost in the last few years, you know, some of them perhaps were getting help, but I imagine that most of them weren't getting the right help or adequate help. And I'm not saying that it's the managers or the record companies or anybody else's fault at all, but I do believe that there are different ways to tackle it. I'm setting up a new business at the moment where we're taking more of a preventative approach to mental health. So we're trying to get everybody to have a mental health and well-being checkup on a regular basis to catch things before you get to these crisis points. And just going back to what I was saying earlier, because I don't want to give the wrong impression, because I have actually worked with lots of managers who are great. And there are very good examples. And someone who I've worked with who came to me originally and was signposted to me and said, look, I'm a manager of an artist and I think they're struggling. I'm not really sure. What should I do? And then I've guided them through and then started working with the artist. And they've taken all my suggestions and built a support network around this individual. And even when I was saying, look, you need to slow the pace down just for a few weeks while this person does a bit of work on their trauma or whatever it was. And the managers responded really positively to that. So there are ways of doing it, and there are people out there who are willing to do it the right way and get people the support they need and break down that codependency, break down that parent-child and move it into adult-to-adult relationships where people take personal responsibility and don't take too much responsibility for someone, which enables them to stay stuck.
So we're coming to the end now, but I'm just thinking about if I'd have been managing you, if you would have, you know, wind back 20 years for us both. And I'm just thinking about what could have been playing out there as a codependent in recovery and as a, you know, addict in recovery. But when you were an addict and I was in full-blown codependency and I'd have been managing your band and I would have seen you struggle, there absolutely 100% would have been a sense that I would be able to save you.
Yeah.
There would be nobody else that
Yeah.
could save you. I would be the one and that would have looked ostensibly from the outside like I was a really, really nice woman.
Yeah. And I would have played on that. I would have come to you and I would have said, "Oh, Sam, I've run out of money and, I just need a bit of money. Can you just give me 20 quid?" And I would have said, if some of the other band members had been complaining because I was falling asleep behind my drum kit, I would have come to you and said, "Oh, Sam, they're being really horrible to me. Can you speak to them?" I would have used your codependency. I would have fed off that in order to protect my addiction and keep it going.
So you would have sniffed that out a mile off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And although you would have been problematic for me as a manager because you were falling asleep behind your drum kit, my need to be needed would have been met. I would have loved the fact that you needed me to sort out your problems. I would have loved the power that I would have had to go in and sort out the problem. Sam can go and sort out the problem. Nobody else can do it. Sam can. Because she has the trust of Chula, and that makes her important. So me going from the sort of periphery of the group, suddenly I'm right in the middle of the group. Suddenly I'm the one the glue that's holding it together.
Everything together,
And of course, for me, that has huge echoes from my family of origin experience. And my family of origin, generational trauma, back 3 generations, which is childhood abandonment.
Right.
Therefore, I cannot abandon you as the addict. Because that's my job. And I've been groomed genetically and generationally to do that. And you can see what a mess, because actually what would have been the healthy and right thing for me to do as a manager in this hypothetical situation would have been to treat you like an adult and not a child, and to go and seek help. And then get you to take responsibility for your, gently reflect back your behaviour to you and say, "I think you're struggling and I've found somebody that perhaps you might want to talk to."
Absolutely, and that would have been the best way forward.
That would have been the best way forward. Okay. Well, I think we'll end it on there.
Okay.
Thank you, Chula.
Thank you.
So nice to see you.
Nice to be
Come
here.
again.
I will.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.